What is virtue? Virtue has a precise meaning in the Catholic intellectual tradition. It derives from the Latin virtus, which means worth, merit, the particular excellence of character or ability, moral excellence, goodness. Virtue means strength or power. It means maximum potential. Virtue as power can describe machines. The maximum potential output from an engine, for example, is measured and given as mechanical horsepower. That's a comparison to the work that horses could do. When the machine achieves its maximum potential, the machine, we say, has reached the fullest and highest expression of its capacity. Virtue implies that there is a perfection of a power. But what does that mean in reference to humans? Virtue in reference to human beings refers to our ability to reach our highest expression and perfection of our powers. St. Thomas Aquinas defined virtue for human beings as an ultimum potentiae, or the furthest point to which a power can reach. The German philosopher, who was a Thomistic scholar, Joseph Pieper, interpreted this to mean likewise, the utmost best a person can be. So we're talking about the power to be fully human when we talk about practicing virtue. No one, however, is born perfect. Humans journey their whole lives to achieve the full power of virtue, and that's what is meant by practicing virtue. And it's why it's important for us to know what those are. If there is an ultimate potential that we can reach as human beings, then there is a penultimate, which means next to ultimate, and a grade lower than that, and a grade lower than that, and so on to the lowest gradation. So it's okay. Virtue occurs in steps. But to be able to practice virtues, we have to know what they are, and there are formulas for those in the Catholic Church as well. The human person is someone becoming. So personhood unfolds in a dynamic reality. We begin as a person, we're becoming who we're meant to be throughout our whole lives, constantly moving towards our end, which is heaven. To practice virtue then literally means to become who we are meant to be. The Catechism of the Catholic Church says that a virtue is a habit and a firm disposition to do the good. We strive to perform good acts and to give the best of ourselves. With all our sensory, using our five senses of sight, touch, hearing, smell, and our spiritual powers of intellect and free will, we make choices. We choose what is good, and we determine how to do the right thing in every step along the way in our life. The goal is to what? To be like Christ. Catholics should follow the laws of God then, but the Church does not ask Catholics to pursue virtue just for the sake of following laws. Following these laws and striving for virtue is, though, the path to happiness. To practice virtue, we form our consciences. And in doing so, we form good habits and good attitudes and good dispositions towards the things we deal with in life. We guide our conduct according to reason and faith. The reward in living this way is that doing the right thing over your lifetime becomes easier. We master our passions and we find joy in leading a moral life. Practicing virtue is not only the path to happiness, but to freedom. Virtue takes effort and commitment. We form habits then for happiness, we say. That's why we practice virtue. There are three theological virtues. These are, and you know these, faith, hope, and love. These theological virtues have to do with God. It's true that someone can attain some happiness by means of natural principles and reason alone, but such happiness has a limit that only goes so far. There is a happiness, a blessedness, we might say, beyond nature and reason that is directed towards God, who St. Thomas says is the first beginning and last end of all things. This supernatural happiness requires grace, divine assistance. And that is why these virtues are called theological virtues. The theological virtues require us to look beyond ourselves and our own lives towards God. Love is the highest theological virtue. In the order of perfection, love precedes faith and hope, because goodness and happiness cannot be believed in if it is not hoped for. And such joy cannot be hoped for unless goodness and happiness are first desired and loved. As St. Paul says in his first letter to the church of Corinth, the greatest of the theological virtues is love. Authentic virtue, meaning really striving for the goodness in your life to be all that you're meant to be. Authentic virtue is rooted in the highest spiritual power of charity, caritas, the highest form of love. The love we mean when we say that God is love. Aquinas calls this love the mother and the root of all the virtues. So you have to start with love to practice virtue in your life. There can be no authentic virtue without love. St. Augustine more succinctly defined Christian virtue as nothing else than perfect love of God, the chief good, the highest wisdom, the perfect harmony. This is consistent with what St. Paul the Apostle said about love, quoting, "And if I have the gift of prophecy and comprehend all mysteries and all knowledge, if I have all faith so as to move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing." That's in 1 Corinthians 13:2. So those are the theological virtues. We need those to be able to practice the cardinal virtues authentically. Let's talk about those. There are 4 cardinal virtues: prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. The cardinal virtues are the natural virtues in scholastic philosophy. They are ordered as well. There's an order to all of this, a formula. Prudence is the ability to make right decisions, and it is the highest, the mother, of all the cardinal virtues. Without prudence, one cannot practice justice, because unless right decisions are made, fairness cannot be measured. Without justice, fortitude, courage, and temperance, which is self-control, cannot be balanced. But prudence also depends on the theological virtues of faith, hope, and love. All 7 virtues, the 3 theological and the 4 cardinal, fit together and depend on each other. We need to practice virtues to form habits. The word habit comes from the Latin habitus, meaning to have a quality, to own it. Habit is a disposition, it's something you own. And in the case of virtue, it refers to practicing the virtues intentionally so that we possess the quality. So that is an introduction to the virtues. I encourage you to look them up and study them more, particularly what St. Thomas Aquinas has to say about the virtues. As you start to learn them and practice them in your life, you'll start to see why they really are the path to happiness.
I'm Bishop Joseph Strickland. Thank you so much for viewing this episode of The Way of Christ. It is an excellent resource for growing in your Catholic faith, for deepening your life in Jesus Christ. You can purchase your own copy of The Way of Christ at stphilipinstitute.org/store. God bless you, and let us continue to grow in His light.